Hello, everyone. Welcome to our recording covering our roles as clinicians and parents being thrust into the role of teachers at home. We have a wonderful multi-institutional collaboration of physicians and, most importantly, parents here to share some advice and experiences. Before we get started, let's get some background on our presenters. My name is Sanjay Patel. I'm a hospitalist and associate program director and medical student clerkship site director for internal medicine at Riverside Methodist Hospital at Ohio Health. But most importantly, I'm now lead teacher for my two daughters at home who are aged 5 and 6.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rashmi Gannon. I am from Ohio State Wexner Medical Center, where I'm a hospitalist. I'm a clinical track director for medical students, and I also teach clinical reasoning and physical exam to medical students. I'm also the wellness officer for hospital medicine, where I create programming to improve physician wellness. And also, most importantly, I'm a mother to a 5 and 8-year-old who are my world, and I'm a part of a dual physician family.
Hello, everyone. My name is Allison Rossetti. I am one of the assistant program directors for our internal medicine and pediatrics residency program at Ohio State University and Nationwide Children's Hospital. I work primarily as a combined hospitalist, and I am the mother and now lead educator, as Sanjay says, to a 7-year-old, 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old.
Hi there, my name is Melissa Skog. I am a pediatric hospitalist at Nationwide Children's Hospital and mom to 4 children, ages 11, 8, 6, and 3. And I should also mention that I've been homeschooling my children for the last 6 years since my oldest started kindergarten.
We don't have any disclosures. So basically today, we just want you to go home with some hacks that you're able to use to help you effectively educate your little learners, little medical students. And we want you to reflect upon these shared experiences with our experiences. So be able to identify and connect with our experiences. And we also want to help you get some resources to keep your children engaged in learning. And there's also some advice we can provide on how to deal with being a dual physician family, and if by chance you end up needing to go under quarantine, ways that you can educate your little learners. The fact is that we have this pandemic that has sort of made us like little medical students again, going from a surgery rotation to an internal medicine rotation, where we're speaking a completely different language than we're used to before. We're coordinating our meetings at home with our meetings for our children via online resources. We are learning new skills as well to take care of our patients and ourselves during this COVID pandemic, and learning how to use resources such as the telehealth system, learning how to bill. We're also balancing different levels of learning with our children, and we are dealing with a little bit extra stress and anxiety with this newfound skill that we have learned. So this wouldn't be complete without getting an interview from the children themselves. I interviewed my children, and they both said what they love most is being with their parents all day long. They love the snacks. They can choose snacks time whenever they want it to be. They can take breaks when they need them. They can go outside. They enjoy teaching their younger siblings, and my son loves having 3 recesses a day. What they don't like is that they have to adjust to different teachers in our house. They have to adjust to my husband's method of teaching. They have to adjust to my nanny's level of teaching. And then they have to also adjust to how I teach them. And, you know, they're away from their friends, as you know. And my daughter always says, you have to close my door. They need their quiet time when they need it, and they need their break time when they need it, which isn't always congruent. And our panelists will also share some of their experiences. And now I'll hand it over to our next panelist about the PDSA cycle.
So here we are, a few weeks into this crisis schooling, as some people have deemed this situation, but we can also think of this in the medical world as our first schooling cycle of our first PDSA for our schooling cycle. As we're likely to need to continue educating our children remotely for the next few weeks or even months, I think it's really a great opportunity to start thinking of what this next PDSA cycle will be for us. So for my family, it was really helpful to take a few minutes and think through what our goals for our kids' education would be during this time, particularly focus on having a positive lens. Certainly for me, this looks very different than the educational goals I had for my children at the beginning of this academic school year. But I think that we can take this unique opportunity to focus on some new and different goals. So we've brainstormed here a list of ideas together, and these are no means an exclusive list, just to kind of give you a few ideas to start thinking through when you're thinking of your own family's goals. This is going to look different for each family, trying to focus on just a few handful of things that will be helpful for you when you're creating this list. And so I think it's important to also remember that this list can help you when you're dealing with daily challenges and difficulties in educating your children, to look back and think about what your goals are to keep you grounded. This is certainly a different season of schooling for our children. We can focus on these unique aspects of their development. So for my family, I know we've had a lot of opportunities placed before us in the last few weeks to deal with emotional intelligence, and we have had a lot of opportunity to work on that. And that is something that we're trying to continue to work on over the next couple weeks, and coming back to that as an educational goal and not feeling defeated when we're doing it differently than normal. So as I mentioned, I've been homeschooling for quite a few years, and there's some things that I found helpful over the years. The first is that routine is usually helpful and children respond well to it, but by no means needs to be rigid. So reassessing frequently for the changing needs of your individual situation is really important. You don't need to recreate school at home. You have to think about, when can this fit into my family's schedule this week? Is it better to do school in the morning? Is it in the afternoon, depending on the parents' work schedule and needs, scattered at different times throughout the day and not as one big chunk? Or just to skip school that day and focus on other things if needed. If one child is having a particularly difficult day or melting down over schoolwork, that may just be their way of voicing frustration and anxiety that's happening during this difficult time. I think another thing for me is to think about how we compare ourselves to others. And so I find that during this time, it's really difficult to be on social media, looking at what other people are doing and not having it as an attitude of comparison. So referring back to our goals, what are the goals for my family? They're going to be different than the goals for someone else's family, and that's okay. And so not using that comparison as a tracker of what we are achieving, but going back to what our goals were certainly will be helpful. And then really celebrating the small wins, because there are going to be tough days. And so being able to celebrate those exciting days that everything went smoothly and no one cried and no one was interrupted is going to be really important.
You know, Melissa, your tips bring about an amazing story to my mind. I love breaking up the day with scavenger hunts related to a lesson my kids have had for the day. When things start to get a little dry, one day I had my kids come into the kitchen and I shouted, "The first person to bring a globe is going to be the winner." I saw them race over the office, grab the globe, and run back to me. And we spun the globe, and wherever my hand landed, my finger landed, I asked them to name that continent. That quickly became a popular game. And as you can see from the pictures on this slide, I had my son bring a game controller, which is lighter than the heavy Dogman book, and I had him explain which one's heavier, which one's lighter. I had them bring a light and heavy object. And then we played a shapes day with my daughter, and I said, "Bring me a hexagon." And she raced to the Tostitos bag and grabbed a hexagon-shaped chip. It really helped break up the day. It really helped them get in some movements, and topics that were before very frustrating to them quickly became favorites.
Thank you, Melissa and Rashmi. I'm sure all of our listeners can relate to some of those experiences that we've been talking about, particularly those bad day experiences, which I'm sure are the ones we remember. And I'm sure we all as parents want to avoid those as much as possible. So then it kind of begs the question, is there a recipe for success? Not always, but our goal here is to try to lay out some sort of structure, tips and tricks to make this easier for all of us at home, particularly the children. Remember, preparation is the key to success when you're looking to set up your curriculum. Think about what your daily outline will look like. It's obviously going to be dependent upon your family structure and dynamics, particularly if both parents are working at home. But some things that might help are, as Melissa mentioned, setting up a schedule, trying to stick to it, but also remaining flexible. Don't forget, we're talking about kids, so they need their fun time. They need to get outside. They still need recess. They need their snacks. Think about your physical setting. Is all of the learning going to be happening in one room? Are there going to be multiple spaces for different subjects, like a reading room and a math room? How's the day going to be spaced out? What if you have meetings all morning? Then that's a great time to think about free time for the kids while you're on your meeting, and then actually uh, moving the education to the afternoon, coordinating with your spouse or partner if need be. When learning at home, just like working at home, there are obviously going to be distractions. Motivation can be difficult. Just a brief story I want to share about my kids. You can see the picture there. Something that worked for them was on the first day that this happened, when we realized we were going to be homeschooling for the foreseeable future. We cut out a bus, we decorated it, and that's our school bus that takes us to school every morning. So it comes and picks them up from their room after they brush their teeth and take a bath, takes them down to breakfast. We sit down and have a morning meeting or a show and tell every morning. And it's something fun for them that gets them motivated to start their day. It certainly helps for us, particularly for our family. We've been able to receive the lesson plans from school the night before. So it helps in synchronizing timing between subjects and how we're going to organize our day the next morning, how we're going to interplay that with our work meetings, which kid's going to need one-on-one attention, and using that time with one kid and maybe allowing the other kid to do some free play. Now, Reshmi, I know you've had a little bit of a different experience with how you've been able to organize your learning at home.
Yes, Sanjay, I do. I do right now don't have access to the assignments the day before, but I've just quickly realized that I gotta make something fast for breakfast, get the kids eating, and that's when I use my time to plan out the day and see what lessons my son and daughter can do together and what are lessons that they'll have to do apart. And then I use some of the resources that you all mentioned. Raz Kids or iReady to keep one child engaged while I'm educating the other child. And so I think that's really helped me.
So in our house, even after we thought we had developed a pretty good expectation for what the children's individual schools expected of them, we realized kind of in that first week that there were mounting frustrations from all parties and increasing tensions because we still weren't transparent enough with each other and with our expectations of each other. So from the children's perspective, there was a lot of frustration about how much work they would have to do that day, when they would get to take a break, when we would go outside and have snack. And then, of course, less favorite subjects tended to incite even more aggravation on their part. So what we did to work together is to set some common goals and expectations. My kids are very visual. And so making a list for each of them for the beginning part of the day that check marks so they can run straight through, that had not only schoolwork, but also house chores, different fun challenges, activity times that they'd have to spend with their brother while the other kid is doing a piece of their schooling, really kind of help them know, okay, these are the things that today is going to hold for me. And then also allowed me to give them choice to work through that list in a manner that they felt fit best for them in that day. Additionally, we had a lot of headbutting over break time. And so allowing our children to say, okay, after this task or after this assignment, here's the kitchen timer. You can set it for 5 minutes and take your break. Not only decreased frustration on both ends, but actually sped up the learning part of the day because we spent so much less time debating how long breaks should be or when they should be warranted. I am a big advocate of nap times or quiet times in our house, and we do this during the summertime as well. So even when children have outgrown their quote unquote nap, we do have quiet time in our house from 2 to 3 p.m. And I would strongly encourage you, if you have not tried this before, to try it. It has been a total gift for us. So the toddler absolutely naps. My middle child actually will usually nap. And then our oldest child, who obviously would not nap at school, will sometimes surprise us both and rest and nap, but other times can be doing things like audiobooks or quiet play with herself. And that gives my husband and I a time to refresh or make another surge in another work-related effort. From the parents' perspective, we quickly realized that we could not be doing two things at once with any amount of efficiency or efficacy. And so decided pretty quickly that without another grown-up in the house, that we were going to have to divide and conquer a little bit. So looking at our Outlook schedules and really dividing up based on calendars, who could do what shift and be with the kids, and then take a break and go back to the work setting, and the next person would kind of tap in. And that varies on a day-to-day basis, but gives us a better opportunity to really focus on our priorities as opposed to being spread very thinly. Between the two of us, children and parents, there was a lot of frustration about how we were communicating interruptions. I think anybody who has children knows that frequently they have requests, and frequently those requests are understandably the most important thing to them at that moment. So even after you fed them a full breakfast, 10 minutes later, there's a request for toast that to you might seem a little absurd, but to them is extremely important. And as we were working in multiple modalities, either on phone or Skype or Zoom or on the computer, it felt almost like a nagging from both parties to have the kids asking repetitively for different needs or wants, although they weren't unreasonable. So what we decided is to use a different lingo in our house and to say, are you working, for the child to interrupt the parent. So are you working? Are you working right now? Kind of helped them, the children, remember that in fact we were still probably working from home and had something else that maybe needed to be accomplished on our end, but also felt less intrusive to us as parents. It kind of like an excuse me does when you're having a conversation with another adult and your child comes up and needs something. So that has really decreased a level of contention in our house. Just those simple, are you working, phrase before a request. And then finally, of course, utilizing your community. There was a great article in the Journal of Hospital Medicine, 10 Tips for a Crisis, Lessons from a Soldier, by Mark Hartling. And I really enjoyed his concept of first and foremost finding a battle buddy. And that was important to me at work to have a battle buddy, a working battle buddy, but has been really important for me in this journey of education at the home to have parents that I can rely on as my battle buddies kind of in the trenches doing this experience together. Certainly my kids, the light of their day is spending time with their classmates or friends via any type of kind of virtual encounter. Another thing that I really tried to learn during maternity leave was to always accept help that was offered to me, even if I felt like I had it. And so really taking teachers up or tutors up or other helpers up when they offer to spend time with the kids and doing learning activity with the kids has really helped me be able to balance a little bit better, albeit not perfectly, doing work and education at the same time. So I strongly encourage folks to take people up on those opportunities when they offer. So after getting through that, the next part of kind of our home makeup is how to involve the toddler in all our learning experiences. Initially, when I thought about writing about this, I thought maybe I could just post good luck and Godspeed to anybody who's managing a toddler at home, because it is really adding some extra dynamics, to say the least, in our house. And so when I thought about it a little bit more, I thought, no, if it's the hardest thing that we're doing right now, I should really try and talk about it, at least see if anything that we're doing in our house resonates with anybody who listens. I chose the trauma primary survey, ABCDE, approach to this because, quite frankly, sometimes after educational sessions, my area looks like a used trauma bay. Okay, it is a little bit wild, but A is for attention. Anybody, again, who has children knows that toddlers require a lot of attention. And so what I have tried to do is be very purposeful for those first minutes of the morning. So for the first 30 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, where the girls are getting kind of their school set up, of really spending quality one-on-one time with our toddler and filling up his attention gas tank, so to speak. So he really feels like he's gotten a lot of one-on-one time with mom. And that can kind of sometimes carry us through. Alternatively, any day that the weather is even somewhat reasonable, taking everybody outside for 30 minutes to really run out some of that energy has also improved our ability to then have sit in quiet time or quieter time, realistically, with our family as we do learning. I put B for bins. I probably lost half of my toddler parents by having bins up there. And I will agree with you that I found it actually pretty intimidating. The idea is activity bins. So bins that you would have that are full of different activities that you could pull out only during the learning session, so they maintain their novelty for your toddler to go through, whether it's books or toys that they don't always have access to, sensory bins. I found it very overwhelming to make bins, so instead rely on a few different tricks at our house. I find, again, with a similar theme, that giving them exposure to items that they don't usually get to play with goes a lot further. So masking tape or painter's tape on the high chair tray that they can pull and peel and stick and move other places. Contact paper on the high chair tray that you spread things around that they can peel and pull off. Again, gets me easily a good 15 minutes of quieter time. And then you see my son down in the corner using cotton balls and stuffing them into a water bottle. So those are colored cotton balls. That's another activity that he really likes, is kind of sorting things. Some activity bins, people endorse, dried rice or dried beans and using kitchen utensils, colanders, spoons, scoopers, etc. I found rice and beans to be an absolute disaster to clean up, although very, very fun. So use, in my true Italian fashion, rigatoni or other dried noodles, because they're much easier for me to pick up, but still have a lot of clanking and fun noise to them. C is for change up. Don't be frustrated. Toddlers' attention spans are so short, as everybody knows. If I can get 15 minutes out of any activity that I've listed, I feel like it's an absolute win. So change it up. Maybe the next thing up is Play-Doh, that you put the blob in front of them, but give them, again, something that they don't usually get to play with. Car keys, floral, fake flowers that you have at home that they can kind of make a little floral arrangement with the Play-Doh. Anything that they don't usually have access to, I think, really gives me a few more of those precious minutes as we're trying to do our education session. D is for destination. We like to do a lot of our work at our kitchen table. You can see my daughters there in the middle picture doing some of their work there, but that is not always the best place to involve a toddler because it's so confined. And I'm sure many people don't have particularly child-friendly parts of their house. So realizing, maybe that's better to move to a finished basement where the kids can be at a small table and the toddler can run around and you can kind of have your foot in both realms. E, of course, exposure, right? I joke that if you ever want to entertain my kids for hours, let them take their clothes off. They'll be entertained ad nauseum forever. But truly, my messiest games are the ones that get me the most amount of time to focus on something else or another task. So I have an understorage bin that I will fill with water and let them wash toys, or use different measuring cups to measure out and do have some water play fun there. Sometimes put bubbles or bath salts or whatever is in there to play with. And then shaving cream. If you've never made a shaving cream cake before, I'm telling you, that'll buy you an easy hour of time if you're not afraid of a little bit of mess in your kitchen. Also, exposure is involving our toddler in our learning experience, right? And so really trying to look at the game plan and say, hey, what are these activities that he can join us with? And then also, how can I alter some of the expectations that the school has so that the toddler can participate. So the other week we had a solar system worksheet, and I thought, well, instead of doing that, let's sit together on the couch and read the Magic School Bus under the solar system. So we're still exposing the learning child to the content, but we're actually able to kind of wrap in the toddler with us so that he can get some of that hands-on time with the family.
Yeah, Allison, those are great ideas and particularly useful in keeping that toddler busy. And I think a lot of us probably have more than one child, like you're mentioning. And so this transition to my slide is really talking about how to keep more than one age child engaged with each other. So in our home, we have 3 school-age children and 1 preschooler. So that makes for a lot of busy, needy children. And so some of the things that we found to be really helpful in trying to kind of get either individual time with one particular student who needs help. For example, if someone is having difficulty with reading and needs one-on-one attention with that subject, how do you get that free time? Or for a parent to be able to have some time to be able to get work done as well. So we like to buddy up our older children and have them help engage with a younger child. And in our home, our oldest is 11 and the next is 8. And so we consider anyone who's older than someone else an older child. And so you can use this with a 7 and 5-year-old. The 7-year-old gets to be the older child and help. So this isn't something just for those of you who have teens or older kids. So we typically will assign an older kid to a younger kid as a playmate or a buddy for a period of time when we're trying to get that difficult schoolwork done with someone else. And that just means that they are in charge of that kid for that period of time, keeping them entertained, sort of out of our hair, not coming to us asking for snacks or needing help with the bathroom, things like that. But we can also use some educational tools as well. And so oftentimes I will ask the older child to read a story to the younger child. And that helps with the older child's reading fluency, and the younger child is enjoying the story having been read to by someone other than the parent. On the flip side of that, I have a kindergartner who is learning to read, and so he will often practice reading to his older sibling, and they are helping kind of sound out words and things like that. And so both children can benefit from different educational opportunities. We also have our older kids sometimes correct work for the younger kids, and that is a big time saver because it's a lot to go through multiple kids' work on a daily basis and correct and have to go back and have them redo things, while in real time someone else can be helping them with that. And it helps that older kid to have a sense of responsibility and feeling they're part of helping out the parent. One of the other things we really like to do in our house that takes a little bit of time, but the investment has paid off, is having the kids cook together. And the benefit of this is really that you get to eat the good stuff that they cook. But some of the other benefits are definitely educational. So one person is reading the recipe out loud, the other person is gathering ingredients, they're doing math, they're counting, they're having to use fractions. And particularly in our larger family, having to double recipes. So there's a lot of multiplication happening at once. They work as a team, and then they have to clean up as a team. And so there's a lot of things that can go into that can be put into that educational box, and sort of free up some time for a parent to have, either for the other child or for themselves. There's another concept that is more kind of well known in the homeschool world, but I think is really helpful in this era when we're having multiple kids at home and trying to keep people happy for a longer period of time. And this is a concept known as strewing. And it's really a parent is kind of very strategically leaving out invitation for play. And so the children are not aware that this is going to be an activity. This is not an adult-led project. This is a little bit different than the concepts that Allison was talking about, which is kind of a more specific directed activity, and those are fantastic. But this idea is really, you could potentially leave a book that they haven't looked at for a long time with really beautiful pictures on the kitchen table with some new art paper and crayons and see what happens. Or you can leave some new building blocks that they haven't played with for a while. Typically, I'll just walk around the house and find things that I find that they haven't played with for a long time and sort of arrange them. So a cash register that has found its way to the bottom of the toy bin will somehow emerge with some paper next to it and some play food, and all of a sudden I find all four of my children are setting up a pretend restaurant, and someone is the cook and someone is the waitress, and they're using money, and then they've set up a store. And so this can kind of lead to a lot of creative play for the kids, and they can all be playing together simply by kind of leaving things out very easily for them to find on their own with no prompting from the parents. So this leads me to talk about a little bit of what I mentioned earlier, which is how to turn around a bad day. And so I think I mentioned earlier that, bad days are expected. And in our house, we've had quite a few of these recently. These pictures I put here because I thought they were kind of in my mind, pictures of what I think my day is going to look like typically. So a child being incredibly helpful and making lunch for someone else, and all gathered around reading together and smiling or out exploring nature. And these are, I'm sure as parents, all of us have these visions of these moments where this is what we think our day could look like. And by, 9 a.m., things are looking much different. So in our house, typically it starts out with very high expectations from me. I have something fun planned for later in the day that I'm excited to do with them, and we're making breakfast and someone spills a gallon of milk on the floor, and so I throw them outside to try to clean that up. And while they're out there, they get into a wreck on their scooter, and someone has a fat lip and someone else is crying. And oftentimes it just feels like it's time to throw in the towel. And then on top of that, we have work responsibilities and obviously schooling to do as well. And so sometimes we just need a way to turn around that bad day or restart or reset. So I have here just a few ideas for things that you can do to turn around a bad day. So on the next slide, I have a list. One of the things that we like to do as a family that really works like magic is to sit down and start reading. And so this particularly works well when kids are being really whiny, when they're maybe bickering with each other or crying over kind of minor things and multiple emotional meltdowns are happening at once. I will walk over to our bookshelf, grab a favorite picture book, sit down and open it up and start reading aloud to myself. Feels a little silly for the first minute or so, but within a minute or two, at least one child who's been crying has kind of made their way over. They want to see what's going on in the story. Maybe another child is playing quietly nearby and becoming a little more interested. And before I know it, there's people on my lap and my older kids are leaning over my shoulder, wanting to see the pictures, and memory about good times reading these books together comes back. And then it's on to the next book. And, we'll sometimes spend 20, 30 minutes. They'll just continue to pass books to me and we'll read for a while. And somehow that just resets everyone. It's the physical closeness with each other and just, connecting to the characters or well-loved stories, new or old. And we're able to sort of reset and start over for the day. So that is absolutely one of our favorite ones. I think Allison mentioned getting outside, and I'm a huge proponent of getting outside on a regular basis. I send my kids outside typically multiple times throughout the day when they need a reset individually, but also as a family when we're having a really tough day. Sometimes we'll just go out for half an hour, go on a walk or a bike ride or get out to a park to see if that can kind of reset everyone's emotions and come in ready to calm down. And then sometimes there are just days that despite your best efforts, all the things that you're doing, it just isn't going to work out. And so I think we need to remember as parents and as teachers during this time that we can be empowered to feel free to stop school for that day. I always need to remind myself that the struggle between my child and I over math, the meltdown that comes from it, the frustration, the emotions may not be worth the damage to our relationship in the long run or the stress it is causing. And that certainly by no means is this a regular occurrence for us, but there are definitely days when it is more important for the mental health of all the people in our family that we just stop for the day, close the books, we're done with school, and we'll restart tomorrow.
Those are great points, Melissa. And when you think about doing everything that we can at home in order to preserve our mental health, but also let's consider our physical health, kind of the elephant in the room. The reason we're talking about all of this is the COVID pandemic, and all of us are frontline workers who have the very realistic possibility of not only being exposed, but also having to self-isolate. And how does this work if we're having to self-isolate and still trying to figure out how to be not only a parent at home, but also a teacher? Obviously, the health of yourself and your family comes first. And like Melissa said, education for your children is a marathon, not a sprint. If you miss a day, it's fine. Nothing's going to happen. They've got 18 years to figure it out. They will catch up. So it's okay. Some days you just have to let it go. And if it's not working, it's not working. But when you're doing distance learning by yourself, even being distant from your family, how does that look like? And so some tips and tricks, utilizing your family, the ones who are well, spouses, grandparents, siblings, people who can help you out with some of the lesson plans that you have. How do you utilize your children's school friends, your parent network at school? Can they help out with some of the education by maybe doing a lesson as a Zoom meeting or a video meeting and include your child in that, so that you aren't overburdened with that on top of having to deal with the burden of being isolated. Technology has quickly become all of our friends. So doing video meetings for a variety of reasons. You can be in your isolation room and do those meetings with your children over FaceTime or Zoom or any other video platform. Google Classroom is a great tool where you can embed different self-directed resources. You can have have children submit assignments, set due dates, a lot of other capabilities. I can tell you myself, I'm very much anticipating school not to be back in session for the remainder of the year. And I know I'm on service quite a bit for the month of May. And I'm going to be doing this, incorporating kind of self-isolation. I think my kids are probably going to go to my parents' house for the month. But I'm still going to try to stay as involved as I can as an educator for them and figure out how to do this being away from them. And I know, Allison, you had some other tips and tricks as well.
Yeah, so this is a small sampling of things that we've used in our house, and there are many, many more resources online that are all free access right now. Lexia is a high item in our house, and SumDog is probably our other second favorite. What I really like about both of these and a lot of the other online learning right now is that they're auto-piloted, right? So they advance as the child kind of shows mastery of different concepts, they advance the level of difficulty. But also importantly, for example, in SumDog, if the child does not get the correct answer for the math problem, a small tutorial pops out and actually walks them through it just like you would do if you were sitting next to them and trying to show them the difference in the logic or maybe where they misstep. And so I think really getting familiar with a couple of your favorites and having them in the background as an option is wonderful. There are similarly lots of YouTube options. Music with Lindsay is probably our favorite for music. And again, the nice thing that the toddler can participate in as well. Go Noodle or Cosmic Yoga are some things that can help get little bodies moving. If you can't go outside that day, I think these are rather great options. And I think Rajmi actually has a few other too. She found the golden gem of a Spanish language education option that I was actually looking for. So lots and lots of things available. Again, use those parents that you have in your parenting buddy group and bounce ideas off of them to see what other things you can kind of crowdsource. But these are some of our favorites. Similarly, on this slide, these are some of my favorites that were even pre-COVID. So I mentioned the fact that we do quiet time in our house. And so sometimes when I get sort of bemoans about quiet time, I remind them of some of these favorite things that they can do during quiet time. So different podcasts, Wow in the World and Brains On are probably our two favorite. They're great science podcasts. There's another stories podcast for the kids who have great imaginations and love fairy tales. But again, maybe checking out a few lists of your own to have kind of at the ready when you need your house to be on autopilot. Two parents have conflicting meetings at the same time, and you're really trying to avoid using the television for another babysitting effort. I think these are great opportunities. Melissa actually turned me on early in my parenting to the joy of audiobooks, which is so great because it totally counts as reading. So your kids are hearing the story, engaging with the story, and it frees you to be doing something else. So wonderful opportunities there, I think, to get, again, more exposure to reading without the parent having to be the guiding source there. And then finally, using family. Virtual reading time, our grandparents are loving this, and we'll read a book to our children, again, via FaceTime. They've even played Barbies with our middle child via FaceTime for a really prolonged period of time. So don't underestimate the value there. Melissa had a great idea of older children doing a grandparent interview. So really to get a little bit more of the family story down on paper, which helps with a myriad, right, of the learning opportunities there, and also gets a chance for the grandparents who are usually isolated to be able to have that connection with their grandchildren. So I think that's a wonderful relationship builder. Our kids are definitely getting more household responsibilities, some of which they've asked for, including cleaning up after the dog and doing dog walking, which I think is awesome. But don't be afraid, I think, to push that on there. And that is something that we've included in our daily lists of tasks. So even if it's a chore that they haven't done before, sweep the floor, vacuum the living room, they are actually novelty factors because they haven't been able to do that before. And so they really kind of jump at that opportunity. So I encourage folks to try and challenge their children basically with new tasks that they haven't had on their plate yet.
Yeah, I think those are some fantastic tools, Allison, and it really shows how you can use your educational curriculum that might be given to you by the school and then supplement that with other experiences. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about myself being a career medical educator, reflecting on some of the lessons that I've learned at work, and how do I translate that down to my kids? Thinking about how, translating adult learning theory and different styles and targeting that to my kids. You know, young kids, particularly younger ones, are experiential learners, and they're really getting a lot more out of doing stuff than sitting down and kind of directed questioning and memorizing things. So you can see a couple pictures there of my kids. I do a lot of point of care ultrasound, and my kids, I gave them the machine, and you can see my daughter there trying to get a subcostal view on my other daughter. But they're just learning about the technology. We do some basic anatomy with it. You know, where is the bladder? Where is your tummy? Where is your heart? Things like that. And I even use some of the settings on the ultrasound machine, because we can do measurements, and then we can kind of compare and contrast. Do you think this one is bigger than this one? So it's been an interesting experience for them. This is a way for them also to learn about what I do at work. So they're not just learning, you know, math and reading and so forth, but they're kind of expanding their horizons. Another thing that I've done is probably on the second or third day when we were at home and started this journey that we're all on, I created these pretend airline tickets. I do a lot of global health work, and right before the pandemic hit, I was actually in Bangladesh, and I never actually had a chance to talk to my kids about my trip, because as soon as I got back, I started to work, and then the pandemic hit, and craziness just propagated on itself. But we took a pretend plane flight to Bangladesh. We looked at pictures online. We looked at some of the pictures that I took. I had brought them back some clothing from my trip, so they got to dress up in the clothes that I brought them, and we compared that and contrasted that to my native Indian food and our native Indian clothing. And so it was a fun learning experience for them. They thought they were having fun, but really my intent was that there was going to be some subliminal learning there embedded in there. And you know, the other thing is talking about lessons for many of us as clinician educators in translating those lessons of adult learning theory, the adult andragogy, into child pedagogy learning. So considering how things that we do on a day-to-day basis when we're on rounds with our learners, how do we direct teaching around one particular subject to different levels of learners? So we've got different age kids at home, we've got different levels of learners at work. You know, how do you question your M3 and your PGY3? The line of questioning is a little bit different. And using that same kind of trick at home, how do I teach both of my kids about the same subject, but direct the appropriate line of questioning to them based on their learning level? And also things like using the 1-minute preceptor model at home. Obviously a very shell basic version of that, but getting them to come up with an answer, why, you know, probing their diagnostic reasoning, if you will. Why do they think that? And what would happen if I did this, or what would happen if I do that? So I think we have a lot of tools that we inherently utilize at work every day. And I think it's nice to self-reflect and try to figure out how do we take some of those tools and embed them into the learning of our kids at home.
Thank you, Sanjay. That was a wonderful way to segue. And I wouldn't be wellness officer if I didn't say we have to think about the parents themselves. Being from a dual physician family, as you know, my husband and I are both hospitalists, and trying to keep our children engaged in their schoolwork and maintain both of our meetings that we both have as leadership roles within the hospital, our hospital medicine division. I'm sure some of you can identify with that. So we have really heavily relied on something that Sanjay, Allison, and Melissa brought up, is creating a network with other parents via group chats. And I'd say one thing that's helped me and my husband is to help us focus on self-care as well, because and I think everybody's mentioned this, if you're not well yourself, you can't really be there for your children. So taking that time out for yourself. For me, I take that time from 12 to 1. And as you can see here, there's a picture of my nanny feeding my kids lunch. So we've just told her, you'll come, you know, from noon to 1 and you'll feed the kids lunch, and that'll be the time that I go work out, or I have a work meeting at that time. And we anticipate those breaks ourselves. And so we're able to kind of educate our children in the morning and then anticipate that break, knowing that we're going to have that time. So there are multiple ways that you can get caregivers. I know at Ohio State and other surrounding institutions, medical students have offered their time as caregivers. Care.com offers a discount as well to physicians, frontline workers. And so that's another resource you can use if you're a resident or a medical student, or attending physician. And as Allison and Melissa and Sanjay have mentioned as well, try and keep your meetings spaced out as you're able to. I know sometimes that can be difficult, but remember to always frequently check in with your partner and say, hey, I know your day is Monday, Wednesday, Friday to teach the children, but are you doing okay? Just that simple check-in keeps the overall wellness in the house going at a good pace, and ask frequently, what can I help with? I think these techniques have helped us run a smooth classroom inside our house. So you've been presented with a lot of things today, a lot of new techniques and a lot of new resources. Some are old, some are new. But I think there are some takeaways that would help you to keep a smooth running school and workplace environment in your house. So remember that preparation is key. And if you're like me and you have to prepare for a short time in the morning, use that time as like Allison and Sanjay mentioned, as a share time, or to get your materials together for your kids. Remember to set those expectations and goals for yourself, but remember to be flexible and fluid. And you know your children best. So make sure that if they need a break at this time, that you take that. And remember to have a plan in case you end up needing to be self-quarantined, or and have that parent network in place. I think building that right now would be a good time if you haven't done so, or if you have that in place, to really use that as a resource. And that segues into, it does take a village to help educate our children the best that we can. But remember that you're not alone. We're all in this together. And to be honest, our children will go back to school and they'll get back on track. So if there are things or days that you're not unable to do all the goals that you wanted to accomplish, realize that that's okay. We hope that today you were able to gain some tips and tools. And here's our contact information. I will just move our presenter screen a little bit to allow you time to scan this QR code. You can submit some questions to us directly. And with that, I will close this current presentation.